There's a sound that darkness makes when it realizes it picked the wrong one. It's not a scream, it's not a roar. It's the sound of whispers turning into accusations. It's the sound of lies eating their own children. This is not a coincidence that you're here right now, watching this message. This is not random. This is not luck. Because what I'm about to reveal to you has been hidden in plain sight for months, maybe years. And the forces that tried to bury this truth, they're about to wish they never opened their mouths. Here's what they didn't tell you about spiritual warfare. When darkness comes for the innocent, when lies target the pure-hearted, when manipulation tries to destroy someone walking in divine purpose, the universe doesn't just take notes, it prepares a reckoning. You see, there's something about attacking the chosen that the enemy never calculated. Something about targeting someone with clean hands and a pure heart that activates, let's call them, ancient laws. Laws older than their schemes, laws more powerful than their networks. What if I told you that the very people who believed the lies about you are now turning on the ones who told them? What if I told you that the circle they built to destroy your name is now collapsing from the inside? What if everything they said about you is now being said about them? Because here's the secret they never saw coming. When you lie on the innocent, you don't just attack a person, you attack a frequency, you attack a force, you challenge something bigger than yourself. Right now, as I speak these words, there are conversations happening in rooms you'll never see, confessions being whispered in darkness, regrets cutting through hearts like spiritual surgery. The very people who clapped when your name was dragged through the mud are now asking themselves the one question that changes everything. What if we were wrong? Thank you to every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and plant that seed of faith. Let your heart guide you. But what happened next? What's happening right now, in the spiritual realm while you're watching this, made the darkness tremble. Let's begin. They thought they could rewrite your story without your permission. They were wrong. You didn't volunteer for the drama. You didn't audition for the role they cast you in. You were just trying to survive, mind your business, and heal in the quiet corners of your life. But while you were busy being authentic, someone else was busy being creative. They took your name, your character, your reputation, and they dragged it onto a stage you never signed up for. And oh, how they performed. They lied with boldness. They slandered you with style. They painted you as the villain in a story where you were never even present for the script reading. They turned your silence into guilt, your boundaries into aggression, your peace into something twisted and dark. They took everything pure about you and fed it to an audience hungry for drama. And the world clapped. They clapped because the performance was convincing. They clapped because it felt good to have someone to blame, someone to point at, someone to make them feel better about their own unhealed wounds. Your name became their entertainment. Your pain became their platform. Your reputation became their currency. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what they couldn't see from their little theater of lies. In the spirit realm, the angels were silent. Not because they didn't care, not because they weren't watching, but because they knew something the audience didn't know. They knew the truth was lacing up its boots. They knew that every lie told in darkness would eventually meet the light. They knew that false narratives require an audience, but truth requires only time. You see, beloved, when someone lies on the innocent, they don't just attack a person, they attack a frequency. They attack something sacred, something protected, something that carries the signature of the divine. And when you mess with what God has marked, when you lie on what God has covered, you don't just make an enemy of that person. You make an enemy of the universe itself. They thought they were directing a play, but what they were really doing was writing their own judgment. Every false word they spoke, every twisted narrative they spun, every lie they told with such conviction it was all being recorded, not just by human hearts, but by forces they couldn't see. You didn't know it then, but you were never fighting this battle alone. While they were busy performing for their audience, building their case with lies and manipulation, something else was happening, something quiet, something patient, something unstoppable. The truth was gathering evidence. Justice was taking notes, and time was preparing to reveal what really happened in the dark. They lied loud, But truth don't whisper forever. You want to know why your silence drove them crazy? You want to know why they couldn't leave you alone, even after they thought they'd destroyed you? Because silence in the face of lies isn't weakness. It's power. It's confidence. It's the quiet assurance of someone who knows that eventually, all things hidden come to light. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Because here's what liars fear most. They fear the moment when people start asking questions. They fear the moment when their story stops making sense. They fear the moment when someone looks past the performance and sees the puppet strings. They fear the moment when the audience realizes they've been watching a show and the real villain has been on stage the whole time. And that moment of revelation, it was always coming. Because God doesn't need an audience to vindicate the innocent, just timing. While they were building their theater of lies, brick by brick, lie by lie, God was building something else. Something they couldn't see, something they couldn't stop, something they couldn't manipulate or control or perform their way out of. God was building their collapse. You see, when you attack someone who moves in truth, when you lie on someone who walks in integrity, when you slander someone whose heart is clean, you don't just tell a lie. You sign a spiritual contract. You agree to face the consequences of fighting against forces bigger than yourself. They thought they were playing a game, but what they were really doing was challenging the cosmic order itself. And that order, it doesn't lose. Every word they spoke against you was heard. Every false accusation was recorded. Every lie was witnessed, not just by people, but by powers they never considered. And now, after all this time, after all their performances, after all their applause, the curtain is falling. The audience is starting to see behind the stage. They're starting to notice the inconsistencies. They're starting to ask the questions that should have been asked from the beginning. They're starting to realize that the person they were told to hate never actually did anything worth hating. Your innocence didn't just survive their attack. It became the very thing that exposed their guilt. They created a theater of lies. But you were never acting. You were always real, always authentic, always true. And truth has a way of cutting through deception like light cuts through darkness. They lied with boldness, but you lived with integrity. They performed with passion, but you existed with purpose. They built their stage with manipulation, but you built your life with meaning. And now, as their theater crumbles, as their audience turns away, as their lies lose their power, there's something they're finally beginning to understand. You can lie about the light, but you cannot extinguish it. The truth was never hiding. It was just waiting for its moment to shine. And beloved, that moment has arrived. They didn't need proof, just a reason to feel superior. You know what hurts the most? It wasn't the lie itself. It was how quickly they grabbed it, how eagerly they swallowed it whole without even chewing, like they'd been starving for permission to think less of you, and someone just rang the dinner bell. See, the people who believed the lie about you, they weren't innocent bystanders who got fooled. They were willing participants in your crucifixion, because deep down, in the places they don't like to look, your presence had been making them uncomfortable for a long time. You walked different. You talked different. You didn't need their approval to breathe. You didn't beg for inclusion in their circles. You didn't perform for their applause. And that quiet strength of yours, that unshakable peace you carried even when life was kicking you down, it was like a spotlight shining on everything they weren't. Your authenticity exposed their masks. Your integrity highlighted their compromises. Your ability to stand alone revealed how desperately they needed the crowd to feel worth something. They didn't hate you because you were bad. They hated you because you were real. And real people make fake people nervous. So when someone came along with a story that painted you as the villain, they didn't ask for evidence. They didn't demand receipts. They didn't say, wait, that doesn't sound like them. Number. They grabbed that lie like a life preserver in a sea of their own insecurity. Because believing you were guilty meant they could finally feel innocent. Believing you were the problem meant they didn't have to face their own emptiness. Believing you were dangerous meant they could justify the jealousy they'd been carrying like poison in their hearts. The lie survived because it fed their inner jealousy. You weren't the villain in their story. You were the mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They reflect exactly what's standing in front of them. And what was standing in front of you was a room full of people who couldn't stand to see their own reflection. So they shattered the mirror instead of changing what it showed them. They thought if they could convince everyone you were broken, no one would notice they were the ones bleeding. They thought if they could make you look small, they would look bigger. They thought if they could tear down your reputation, theirs would somehow shine brighter. But here's what they didn't understand about spiritual laws. When you attack someone walking in truth, you don't diminish their light. You reveal your own darkness. When you lie on the innocent, you don't expose their guilt. You expose your own corruption. And now the very people they convinced to turn against you are starting to see the pattern. They're starting to notice how this person always has an enemy, always has drama, always has someone to blame for their own emptiness. The circle is turning because the truth has a way of surfacing. And once people realize they were manipulated into attacking someone who never deserved it, the shame cuts deep, deeper than any sword. You weren't the villain, you were the mirror. And now they're all looking into it, seeing themselves clearly, for the very first time. They thought they were spreading rumors, but what they were really doing was declaring war on heaven itself. Listen to me, chosen one. What happened to you wasn't gossip, it wasn't drama, it wasn't even personal, though it felt like they reached into your chest and tried to rip out your very soul. What you experienced was a full-scale spiritual assassination attempt. Hell looked at your calling, saw the light you carried, and said, "Not on our watch." They didn't just want to hurt your reputation, they wanted to murder your identity. They wanted you to look in the mirror and see their version of you staring back. They wanted you to believe the lie so deeply that you'd bury your own voice in shame. They wanted you to become so afraid of your own shadow that you'd never step into the light again. But here's what the enemy miscalculated. Here's what they never saw coming. You weren't just carrying your own strength, you were carrying something ancient, something anointed, something that doesn't break under pressure, it breaks chains. They tried to assassinate your calling with gossip. They thought words could kill what God had birthed. They thought if they painted you dark enough, twisted your story far enough, the world would forget who you really were. But you know what happened instead? The lie became a spotlight. Every false accusation, every twisted narrative, every character assassination attempt only made your true character shine brighter. You didn't break. You birthed clarity. See, this is what happens when darkness comes for someone marked by divinity. The attack isn't random. It's strategic. It's coordinated. It's designed to make you question not just what others think of you, but what you think of yourself. They wanted you to become your own worst enemy. They wanted the shame to eat you alive from the inside out. But they made one fatal mistake. They assumed your identity came from human approval. They thought your worth was tied to public opinion. They didn't realize that what flows through you was established before the foundation of the world. You can't kill what was born in eternity with lies that were conceived in time. The smear campaign wasn't about you. It was about what you represent. You represent hope for the hopeless, truth for the deceived, light for those stumbling in darkness. And when you carry that kind of frequency, when you embody that kind of power, hell doesn't just notice, hell mobilizes. They whispered lies about you because they couldn't silence the truth you carried. They attacked your character because they couldn't touch your calling. They tried to destroy your reputation because they couldn't diminish your revelation. But here's the plot twist they never anticipated. Every lie they told became evidence of your anointing. Every false accusation became proof of your authenticity. Every attempt to bury you only revealed how deep your roots really go. You didn't fight fire with fire. You didn't descend to their level. You didn't become what they said you were. You transcended the battlefield entirely. While they were busy fighting shadows in the mud, you were walking in the light they couldn't even see. The spiritual warfare wasn't about reputation, chosen one. It was about recognition. Hell recognized you before the church did. Darkness saw your light before people saw your gifts. The enemy identified your calling before you fully understood it yourself. And that's how you know you're exactly who God says you are. They tried to make you forget, but instead, you remembered. They thought repetition would make their lie immortal. But here's what they didn't understand about echoes: they grow weaker with every bounce. You see, chosen one, they couldn't stop talking. Every conversation became their stage. Every room they entered transformed into their personal courtroom where they played judge, jury, and victim all at once. They turned your name into their favorite song, spinning the same twisted melody until even their closest allies started covering their ears. But something beautiful happened in that darkness, something they never saw coming. The more they talked, the more they revealed, not about you, about themselves. Every embellishment exposed another crack in their foundation. Every added detail screamed of desperation. Every performance grew more theatrical, more unhinged, more obvious. You didn't have to say a word. Your silence became their loudest enemy. While they were busy building their echo chamber, you were building character. While they were rehearsing their victim script, you were healing in the quiet. While they were demanding an audience for their pain, you were transforming yours into purpose. And that contrast, that contrast became impossible to ignore. The lie didn't kill you, it aged them. Watch what happens when someone builds their entire identity around destroying yours. They become hollow, they become desperate, they become see-through. Because when you spend all your energy pointing fingers, you forget to look in the mirror. And mirrors don't lie, even when people do. Their allies started noticing things, the obsession, the way every conversation somehow circled back to you, the way their eyes lit up with a strange fire whenever your name crossed their lips. People began asking the questions that scared them most. Why are you still talking about this? Why can't you just move on? But they couldn't move on, because their lie had become their lifeline. Without it, who were they? Without your name to drag through the mud, what story did they have to tell? Without the drama they'd manufactured, what would fill the empty spaces in their soul? You had become their addiction. Your destruction had become their drug. And like all addicts, they couldn't hide their dependency forever. When you didn't flinch, their performance lost its power. The echo chamber began to crack when people realized something profound. You weren't defending yourself because you didn't need to. You weren't fighting back because you were fighting forward. You weren't trying to prove your innocence because your life was proof enough. Your peace became their judgment. Your growth became their sentence. Your joy became their conviction. And now, as their circle slowly turns away, not toward you, but away from them, they're learning the hardest lesson of all. When you attack someone the universe protects, you don't just lose the battle, you lose yourself in the process. The echo is dying, chosen one, and in its silence, your truth is finally free to speak. They thought your silence meant surrender. They celebrated what they believed was your defeat, thinking you had finally been broken, finally crushed under the weight of their lies. But what they didn't understand was that your silence wasn't submission to them, it was submission to something far greater. You weren't silent because you lost. You were silent because God was speaking. See, there's a difference between being silenced and choosing silence. When the enemy comes for you with lies, accusations, and character assassination, the flesh wants to fight back immediately. The flesh wants to defend, explain, and prove your innocence to people who were never interested in your truth anyway. But the Spirit knows something the flesh doesn't. The Spirit knows that some battles aren't fought in the courtroom of public opinion. They're fought in the courtroom of heaven, and heaven don't rush to court. It builds cases that crush kingdoms. While you stood there in what looked like defeat, God was building a file. Every lie they told was documented. Every manipulation was recorded. Every attempt to destroy your character was cataloged with divine precision. You thought you were being silent, but heaven was taking depositions. You thought you were standing still, but divine justice was gathering evidence. Your silence became the loudest testimony in the spiritual realm. Because when the righteous choose not to defend themselves, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that some victories can only come from above. Some vindications can only be delivered by divine hands. They mistook your stillness for surrender, but you weren't surrendering to them. You were surrendering to the process. You were trusting that the same God who sees sparrows fall was watching every attack on your character. You were believing that the same God who numbers the hairs on your head was counting every tear that fell from the weight of their lies. And while they celebrated what they thought was your downfall, something was shifting in the spiritual atmosphere. Your silence wasn't creating a vacuum, it was creating space for divine intervention. Every word you didn't speak in your own defense became an opportunity for heaven to speak on your behalf. In heaven's courtroom, silence is submission to divine judgment. You didn't need to clear your name because your name was already written in the book of life. You didn't need to defend your character because your character was already established in divine records. You didn't need to prove your innocence because your innocence was never in question where it mattered most. The beautiful irony is that your silence became thunder. While their lies grew louder and more desperate, your quiet strength grew more powerful. While they exhausted themselves trying to maintain their false narrative, you conserved your energy for what was coming next. While they dug their own graves with every exaggerated story, you were being prepared for resurrection. Your silence wasn't strategy you learned. It was strategy heaven taught you. It was divine wisdom downloading into your spirit, telling you to be still and know, to wait and see, to trust and rest. Because when God builds a case, it's not just about clearing your name, it's about exposing the system that tried to destroy it. It's not just about your vindication, it's about divine demonstration of what happens when you touch the anointed. Your silence was never weakness, It was the calm before heaven's storm. They used your name as glue, but the lie couldn't hold. You know what happens when you build a house on quicksand? At first, it looks solid. People gather around. They admire the structure. They feel safe inside. But underneath, the foundation is already shifting, already sinking, already preparing to swallow everything whole. That's what they built around you. A coalition of whispers, a fellowship of false witnesses. They turned your name into their common enemy, your reputation into their shared cause. For a moment, just a moment, it worked. They felt powerful, united, righteous in their rage. But here's what they didn't understand about lies, chosen one. They're not just weapons, they're parasites, and parasites always waste turn on their host. The same crowd they weaponized is now embarrassed to stand near them. Picture this. One by one, like dominoes falling in reverse, their circle began to crack. It started with the quiet ones, the observers, the ones who never spoke up but always watched. They began to notice things, the obsession, the way every conversation circled back to you, the way this person's eyes lit up with a hunger that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with destruction. Then came the whispers. Not about you this time, about them. Why are they still talking about this? Why can't they let it go? Something doesn't feel right. The same people who once nodded along started tilting their heads, started asking questions, started feeling used. You see, there's something about genuine wickedness that can't hide forever. It has a smell, a taste, a vibration that makes people's spirits recoil, even when their minds haven't caught up yet. And the longer this person kept feeding off your name, the stronger that stench became. Any alliance built on lies will always collapse under truth. The confrontation started small, a raised eyebrow here, a changed subject there. But then someone brave, someone tired of the performance finally said what everyone was thinking. This obsession isn't healthy. This isn't about justice anymore. This is about something else. And just like that, the spell broke. The people who once cheered their crusade against you began to see it for what it really was. A desperate attempt to feel important by tearing someone else down. A hollow performance dressed up as righteousness. A lie so hungry for attention that it devoured everything in its path, including the liar's own credibility. One by one, they stepped back. Some quietly, some dramatically, some with apologies whispered in dark corners. I think we were wrong about them. But the most devastating exodus? The loyal ones, the true believers, the ones who had defended this person's character, who had vouched for their integrity, who had put their own reputations on the line. When they finally saw the truth, when they realized they had been used as soldiers in a war built on lies, their departure wasn't just painful. It was surgical. The liar was left standing in a crater of their own creation. And you never had to lift a finger. You never had to defend yourself, argue your case, or prove your innocence. The truth did all the heavy lifting. Your silence became their loudest accusation. Your peace became their greatest torment. Your continued existence whole, healthy, healed became the mirror they couldn't bear to look into. They thought they were gathering an army. Instead, they were building their own isolation. They thought they were destroying you. Instead, they were exposing themselves. They thought lies would give them power. Instead, lies gave them exactly what they deserved. Nothing, no one, and the echo of their own empty words bouncing back at them in a room they built, but can no longer fill. The circle didn't just implode, chosen one. It dissolved. Like salt in water, like smoke in wind, like lies in the presence of truth. And the only sound left? The sound of justice, served cold. They thought they could operate in the shadows forever. They thought the darkness would protect their schemes, their lies, their carefully crafted narratives. But what they didn't understand is this. When God decides it's time for exposure, He doesn't whisper, He lights the sky. You've been watching it happen, haven't you? The very people who once hung on their every word are now backing away like they touched something radioactive. The ones who used to defend them with passion are now defending themselves from association. What was once whispered behind closed doors is now being shouted from rooftops. Not by you, not by your supporters, by their own circle, by the very people they thought they owned. See, there's something about divine exposure that human manipulation can't compete with. When heaven decides to turn the spotlight on someone who's been plotting in the dark, it's not just bright, it's surgical. Every lie they told starts glowing like neon. Every manipulation becomes obvious. Every false tear, every crocodile performance, every calculated victim act gets exposed for what it always was. Theater. You didn't have to drag them to court. Heaven subpoenaed the whole room. The beautiful thing about God's justice is that it uses their own weapons against them. Those same people they gathered to destroy your name, they're now the jury delivering the verdict. The same platform they used to spread lies about you is now broadcasting their downfall. The same energy they used to tear you down is now tearing them apart. It's poetic, it's perfect, it's divine. They thought they were puppet masters, pulling strings, controlling narratives, manipulating emotions. But what they really were was evidence collectors. Every lie they told was recorded. Every manipulation was documented. Every false accusation was filed away in heaven's courthouse. And when the time came for judgment, they had built the case against themselves. You know what's shaking them to their core right now? It's not just that people stopped believing them. It's that people are now questioning everything they ever said about anyone. Because once you're exposed as a liar about one person, every story you've ever told becomes suspect. Every victim narrative gets re-examined. Every tear gets questioned. That's the curse of building your identity on deception. When it falls, it takes everything with it. Exposure is the Lord's revenge, and he never misses the target. Watch how their former allies are moving now. Notice how the conversations have shifted. They're not defending the liar anymore. They're distancing themselves. They're covering their tracks. They're rewriting their own stories to remove any connection to the chaos, because nobody wants to go down with a sinking ship, especially when that ship was built on lies. The ones who once called you crazy are now calling them dangerous. The ones who once said you were too sensitive are now saying they were too trusting. The ones who once painted you as the villain are now seeing the real predator in the room. And it's not you. It never was you. This is what happens when innocence gets attacked by forces that don't understand spiritual laws. This is what happens when darkness tries to extinguish a light that was lit by heaven itself. The exposure doesn't just reveal the lie, it reveals the liar. And once that mask comes off, it never goes back on. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let heaven hold the matches. They thought the courtroom was on earth, but the real trial was happening in heaven. You see, chosen one, while they were busy playing judge and jury with your reputation, there was another court in session, a higher court. A divine tribunal where lies don't get to testify and manipulation doesn't get to cross-examine the truth. And you didn't even know you had the best attorney in the universe fighting your case. But heaven was watching, heaven was listening, heaven was taking notes. And when the gavel finally came down, it didn't just echo through the spiritual realm. It shook the very foundations of everything they built on your back. This is the moment when divine justice stops whispering and starts thundering. When the universe stops being patient and starts being precise, when God's silence transforms into God's verdict. And that verdict, it wasn't just in your favor. It was a complete reversal of everything they tried to establish as truth. They stripped you of your reputation. Heaven gave you a crown. They took your voice. Heaven amplified your presence. They tried to bury you in lies. Heaven planted you in truth and watched you bloom like a garden they could never touch. You see, there's something about attacking the innocent that triggers what I call heaven's emergency protocol. It's not just karma. It's not just consequence. It's divine intervention. It's the moment when God says, "Enough. My child has suffered long enough under false accusation. Time to set the record straight." As we reach the end of this divine revelation, I want you to hold on to these truths like precious stones in your heart. Remember that your silence was never weakness. It was wisdom. Your patience was never passive, it was powerful. And your endurance through the lies, the betrayal, the isolation, that wasn't just survival. That was preparation for this moment of vindication. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are not alone in this journey. The same God who saw every tear you cried in private, who heard every prayer you whispered in the dark, who caught every piece of your broken heart, that same God is still working, still moving, still orchestrating your restoration even now. His plans for you haven't changed because of their lies. His love for you hasn't diminished because of their betrayal. His calling on your life hasn't been revoked because of their rejection. And to this beautiful community gathered here, you are family, you are warriors, you are intercessors standing in the gap for one another. When one suffers, we all suffer. When one is vindicated, we all celebrate. This is not just a YouTube channel. This is a sanctuary where broken hearts come to be healed, where the misunderstood come to be seen, where the chosen come to remember who they are. Let me ask you this. Now that you know the truth about divine justice, now that you've witnessed heaven's court in session, How will you walk differently? How will you trust differently? How will you love differently, knowing that every attack on your character was actually an opportunity for God to show His power through your life? Let us pray together. Heavenly Father, I place my hands on the shoulders of every person watching this right now. Lord, you see the ones who've been lied on, betrayed, misunderstood, and cast aside. You see the silent tears, the sleepless nights, the moments when they wondered if you had forgotten them. But you haven't forgotten, have you, Lord? Father, I pray that you would heal every wounded heart watching this message, restore what the enemy has stolen, vindicate what has been falsely accused, elevate what has been pushed down. Let your truth rise like the morning sun, burning away every shadow of doubt, every whisper of shame, every echo of their lies. Open doors that no man can shut. Restore relationships that matter. Remove relationships that harm. Give them discernment to know the difference. Surround them with people who see their true worth, who celebrate their genuine heart, who honor the calling you've placed on their lives. Lord, turn their pain into purpose, their scars into strength, their silence into a powerful testimony. Let their comeback be so undeniable, so divinely orchestrated, that it becomes a beacon of hope for others walking through the valley of false accusation. Bless their steps, Lord, order their path, protect their peace, prosper their purpose, and let them never forget that they are chosen, beloved, and victorious through you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Now, my beloved family, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share your heart. Tell us how God is moving in your situation. Ask for prayer. This community will lift you up. Share your breakthrough testimony. Someone needs to hear that victory is possible. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. If this message blessed you, if it spoke to your soul, if it gave you hope when you needed it most, please share it. There's someone in your circle, someone in your family, someone in your network who needs to hear these words. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know that heaven's court is still in session. They need to know that their vindication is coming. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for opening your heart, for trusting this message, for believing that God still speaks through ordinary vessels to extraordinary people. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, join this family, be part of this movement of restoration and hope. Remember, beloved, your story isn't over. Your best chapters are still being written, and the God who sees all, knows all, and loves all, He's got the final word. Stay strong, stay faithful, stay chosen. Until we meet again, may the peace of God that surpasses all understanding guard your heart and mind. You are loved, you are seen, you are victorious. Peace be with you.